Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, Programming Out Loud. My name is Matthew Goodwin. I'm a full-stack Ruby Rails developer and JavaScript programmer. The purpose of today's video is to learn by teaching. By teaching myself, I hope to reinforce understanding, retain information, and identify new questions. I've been programming for about 5.5 years, and I've come across a number of noteworthy issues. And today, I'm going to explore data structures, specifically the similarities and differences between Ruby hashes and JavaScript objects. They look similar, but they behave quite differently. Okay, and let's start with JavaScript, because no matter what language you use to develop, whether it be Python or Ruby, you will likely use some JavaScript, whether it be an API request, a geocoded feature, a calendar, a modal, an on-click function. JavaScript is the language of the web, and if you are developing a production-level application, then you will likely use some aspect of JavaScript in your application. Okay, so let's create a very basic object. And for clarification, everything in JavaScript is an object, and every object is a hash of properties and or methods. And every time you call a method or a property or reference a variable for that matter, you are performing what's considered an internal hash lookup. Okay, so we'll start by creating a very basic object. We'll start the node, and we will create a movie object, okay? And this object will have a title, and that title will be set to Parasite. I like that movie. And it'll have a year, which will be 2019, and it will also have a director, okay? And this director is Director Bong. If you haven't seen this movie, you should check it out. As I said before, everything in JavaScript is an object, and every object is a hash of properties and or methods. So we're going to add a method here. It's a very basic method, and it's basically just going to return our information from the object, okay? It's going to return information from the object. So getInfo is what we will call it. And this will be set to a function. This function, as I said before, is going to return some very basic information about this object. So we're going to title it first, keyword this, title, and we'll concatenate by concatenation again, this object's director, and we'll concatenate yet again in concatenation this object's year. Okay, so again, we're returning this title by this director in this year. Okay, and we'll close this out, and we will close our object as well. Okay, so what we've done here, if you're a little confused about what you just saw, don't panic, it's pretty straightforward. We have created a key, and we have set that key's value to a function, okay? And this function is going to return this object's title by this object's director in this object's year, okay? And we're only going to have access to that when we call that function, okay? So it's not a big deal. You'll see how it works in a moment. And we'll just do a type of right now because we want to see that this is in fact an object. And movie is in fact an object. Because JavaScript is an object-oriented language, this means that it doesn't have classes, but instead it uses object instances, which are basically represented as JSON objects, and object constructors, okay? This means that we can build fully functioning object instances using regular JSON, okay? So the way we access this is by using dot notation or bracket notation. So we do movie dot title, and we have access to Parasite, or we can do movie dot title, or I'm sorry, movie brackets title, and we have access to Parasite again. Same thing with year. We do movie.year. Whoopsies, movie.year. I apologize, and we get 2019. Okay. The way we access the method, which is basically our function here. Okay, I apologize. Anytime that a function is the property of an object, it is considered a method. Okay, so this is considered a method because it is the value, the function itself is the value of a property inside of an object. So this becomes a method. So the way we access this method is by typing in movie.getInfo, and we have access to our method. Okay, so Parasite by Director Bong in 2019. Very simple, very straightforward. Okay, everything in JavaScript is an object. Not the case in Ruby. We access these objects slightly differently. And in Ruby, they're actually classified differently. They're not called objects, they're called something else. And we'll get into that right now. Okay, so jumping into Ruby, we're going to fire up the IRB. And we're going to create the same object. So we're going to do movie and we'll set that to have a title. And we're going to create this the same way that we created it in JavaScript, just for side-by-side comparative reasons. So parasite, and we will create it the proper way here. So we're going to do director, and we're going to have a hash rocket here. A hash rocket, and we're going to set that to director bong. Sorry, it's a little early in the morning right now. And this is the proper way that you are supposed to write to a Ruby hash or Ruby object. Okay, this is the proper way of doing it. Quote, hash rocket quote. Okay, so this, the first one we did, the title parasite, is simply just for side-by-side comparative reasons because we can write it this way. This is how we're going to write it just so we can see the comparison between that and how we wrote it in JavaScript. Okay, but this is not the proper way. The second one, director, is the proper way, okay? And we'll also do it an old school way, and we'll do year with another hash rocket, and we'll do 2019, okay? And now, we'll forget the function or method for now. We don't need it. We're just gonna use this for demonstrative purposes, and we're gonna close this out. And now we have our object, okay? This is a little bit different than JavaScript, and I'll show that to you now. We'll type in movie.class, and we have a hash, okay? So this is much different than type of in JavaScript. In JavaScript, we have movie, we have type of, and it becomes an object because JavaScript is an object-oriented language. They do not have classes. In Ruby, we actually have classes, so this is considered a hash, okay? So it's even formatted differently, as you can see, and when we try to access this object, this hash, we will have to do it a certain way. So we're going to type it in the same way we did it in JavaScript. We're going to do movie.title, movie.title. And what's going to happen is we're going to get an error. Okay, so this error is called an undefined method error, a no method error. And this basically means that we have called a method on a receiver, but we have not defined that method. Okay, we haven't told Ruby what this method does. Okay, that's because we don't consider it a method. We consider it a property. We're using title as a property when Ruby believes that it's supposed to be an action. Okay, and this is not the case. So the way we access this is by typing in movie bracket, and we type in title, and we get parasite. Okay, and the reason why we have to do it this way is because we defined it this way. Okay, we have to use the colons because we defined it with colons. We wrote it with colons. Okay, so when we try to do this, however, with director, we are going to get nil. The reason for this is because we didn't write it that way. We wrote it the proper way the second time. Okay, so when we access this the proper way, we have to use quotes. So we're going to type in movie, and we're going to use quotes, and now we're going to get director bong. Okay, and same thing with year. If we want to do it with year, we have access to 2019. Okay, because we wrote it this way. Okay, so whenever you use a hash rocket and or use colons, then you have to use colons to access that particular hash property. All right, so going back to this previous statement here, this previous error, the no method error, this is because it's looking for an action, okay? So we haven't defined the action. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you with an action that's predefined, and we're going to use .delete, okay? And delete is a predefined method. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to delete the title. The way this works, however, is it's not going to just delete the value of title. It's going to delete the entire key value pair, okay? So when we type this in, we're running a delete method on the receiver movie, and when we run this, we're going to delete parasite. You see parasite gone, but when we run this again as movie, you'll see that the entire key value pair is gone. So movie is now just gone, okay? I'm sorry, movie title, key value, both gone. We only have director and we have year, and that's okay. But that's just to demonstrate how a function, how a method in Ruby functions, okay? So moving on, if you want to, in fact, access using dot notation, you have to create classes, okay? So Ruby uses classes, as stated before, using the dot class method. And the way you define a class is by simply writing class and what you want the class object to be named, okay? So we want to name this movie, and we're going to say class movie, and we're going to set an attribute accessor. And basically what this is, if you're not familiar, is this is just basically a shortcut. This allows us to read and write to this object, this class object, from the outside, okay? Class objects are private by default. So you have to give access to the object globally. And the way we do this is by writing attribute read or attribute write. And this gives us the ability to read or write to the property, to the class properties, okay, that we're going to define right now. So this attribute accessor not only does read and write, but it also initializes the class object, okay? So we're going to write title, and we're going to have year, and we're also going to have a director, okay? And no particular order, you can write it whatever order you like, but our movie class object is going to have attribute accessor read and write capabilities on title, year, and director, okay? And what we're going to do here is we're also going to create a method, okay? So we're going to define a method here, and our method is going to be info. We'll just call it something simple. And info is going to return our title and our director, okay? We're going to keep this simple. So it's going to output double quotes, very important, hash, at symbol, and we'll get to this in a moment, but for now you just need to know that it exists, and we're going to write title by director, hash at director, okay? And so this is basically, the at symbol is an instance variable, okay? This tells us that this is the class instance variable, and the hash is a way to escape, okay? So we escape this word because we can't just write in double quotes the at symbol, because the at symbol is just a symbol, and it will look like any other symbol, like the T or the I or the E. So we have to escape it, okay? So to escape it, we use the hash, and then we type in our global instance variable, and we have in our variable key, okay? Which is title and director. So title by director. And I hope that's straightforward enough. If it's too confusing, I'll clarify some information later. I'll clarify it later with when we show the full class instance object, okay? So end, and we'll also end the entire object because we're done with this. Cool. So now we have our final instance method. And what we're going to do now is we're going to create an instance class, okay? We're going to create a class instance object, okay? So we're going to type in m1, and we're going to set that to movie.new. And movie.new is going to give us an object, and this is a class instance ID, okay? So a class instance ID. And now that we have our class instance ID, we will have access globally through attribute accessor to our title, year, and director property. So we're going to rewrite to those using dot notations. We're going to have m1.title, excuse me, and we're going to set that to parasite. Actually, what we'll do is we'll change this. We'll keep parasite because it's pretty straightforward and simple for us, okay? So title, and then we have m1.director, and we'll set that to director bound. And then we'll also add the year, okay? So we'll do m1.year, and we will set that to 2019, okay? We'll set this to a different year just so you can see that it's not the same as before. Not that it matters, but just so we can see there is a difference. So what we've done is we've created a class object, and by default, the class object is nil. So we've created a class object, and we've given it read and write and initialize properties of title, year, and director, and we've also defined a method, okay? The method is called info, okay? And we'll call that a little bit later. Okay, so here we have m1, and it's going to give us our global variable, okay? So remember when I wrote it here as at title, I have at title, okay? And the reason why we did that is because this allows us to understand, number one, that this is a class instance, and that we have access to this class instance from outside, okay? Because we use the attribute accessor, all right? And now we're going to access this using dot notations. I'm going to type in m1.title, and we have parasite. I'm going to type in m1.year, and we have year, okay? We don't need to use brackets. We don't need to use quotes. We don't need to use colons. We just need to use the dot notation, and that works perfectly fine, okay? So m1.year, m1.title, and now we can type in m1.info. And we can access our method, okay? And this method basically just returns something similar to what we did here, parasite by director bong 2019, but a little shorter. And it gives us parasite by director bong because that's what we asked for. We asked for at title, parasite by at director bong, okay? And it just returns that for us. Another thing you can do with classes is that it also helps with class inheritance. And this is something very big in Ruby, especially when it comes to models and controllers, because these particular classes inherit from base classes. So what we're going to do is we're going to show how that works. And I'm going to use a variation of movie. We'll just run documentary. Okay, so we'll create a documentary class. So we'll say class, and we'll say documentary. And documentary will inherit from movie, from the base class of movie. So documentary will have access to everything, every property that movie has, because we are giving it to documentary. Okay, we are passing this movie object in all of its properties and all of its initializing, and it's accessing to documentary. Okay, so we're going to run that now. And what we'll do is we'll add one more attribute or property, if you will, and we'll call this we have title, we have year, we have director. We'll call this, I don't know, location, because documentaries usually happen in some location. Okay, whether it be a nature documentary or a social documentary, whatever it is, political documentary, they happen somewhere. So that the location is often very important. So location, and we'll be good here, and we will end just so we can have something else to work with. And again, the default state of a class is null. It's empty. Okay, so we have to initialize our document by saying D1, and we'll set that to document.new. Okay, and as I promised you before, it's going to generate a class instance ID. And as I promised you before, it is going to inherit everything from movie, and it will also have access to its own private property, which is location. Okay, so movie will not have access to location. Only document will have access to location. Okay, and this is important for inheritance reasons, right? So you can, if you're creating a model in Ruby, or if you're creating a controller in Ruby, it will have access to basic security. It'll have access to basic functionalities, basic methods, basic properties that you have defined in the base class. Okay, so that's very important because it's very useful. So what we'll do here is we'll type in D1, and we have access to the same things from movie, title, and we'll call this Amy. I liked Amy. Amy was cool. Finding Sugarman was also cool, really cool. D1.title is Amy, and then we'll say D1 year, and we'll set that to, I have no idea what year that came out. We'll say 2017, 2018, 2018, fine. And we'll say D1 director. I have no idea who the director is, so we'll just say director dot. That's ridiculous, but that's okay. It's just for demonstrative purposes. All right, and we'll also set a location. Okay, so director, D1, documentary, not director. Documentary location. Where am I here? I'm losing my mind. And we'll set that to the UK. Okay, and now we have access to everything. Okay, so we're gonna run D1.title, and that comes from movie, and then we'll run D1.location, which is specific to our documentary. And we'll also run d1.info. And we have Amy by me. Okay, with that said, I'm going to wrap this up. This video was just about the similarities and differences between Ruby hashes and JavaScript objects. If you learned anything at all, go ahead and give me a like and a subscribe. If you have any comments or questions or suggestions for me, go ahead and leave those in the comments down below. And until next time, peace.